Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here. And if my camera decides to focus on me, I'm happy to welcome our panelists here. We have a great group of people here tonight with us, and we are very excited to talk about one of the most complicated topics, I guess, in our careers. And we in IGDA have prepared events like this before. Let me start by introducing myself, actually. My name is Bilgem. I'm a member of the IGDA Seattle board. And one of the things we like to do is to organize events about how we can find our new job or a great match in our careers. This is a common problem that every developer has, and we have done 2-3 different events in the past where we have held panels about how different disciplines like programming or art can search a new job, a new position in a new company, and how to prepare for those interviews, how to do mock interviews, and we have had portfolio reviews for artists, etc. And in all of those events, we were also always thinking about, hey, we have done this nicely and it has worked out well, but there's always this important part of the equation that we haven't covered until now. And I'm so glad that we are doing that tonight. The part that recruiters play in that process is super critical, and we are very fortunate to have our guests tonight who are experts in that field, and that they are generous to share their expertise and time with all of us. To set the expectations, we will be talking about some ideas, tips, and tricks about how to prep resumes and LinkedIn profiles and whatnot to get calls, some of the things that we can all be careful about in preparing those materials, as well as some points about the process itself from that point on, like the interviews themselves, the phone interviews, in-person interviews, if they come back in the near future, hopefully. And we will also talk about a little bit of how the pandemic affected this process and what are some of the new things. So even if you're an experienced job hunter, there are some new challenges and changes that the pandemic may have applied to the process. So we'll talk about those as well. But the bottom line is we are really interested in giving everyone who are here watching us kind of a perspective shift. Because it's commonly, we all throughout our careers go to these jobs, we do job interviews, we search for positions, we apply, we get rejected sometimes, etc. And a lot of people end up having frustrations with the job searching process and interviewing process. And sometimes to a point that they kind of put the idea completely out of their mind and they settle for positions and jobs that they are not really happy at, simply because they are kind of at odds with the process itself. And the thing we want to make sure is that, hey, this is a process, this is a game that we all need to play. As long as we understand its rules and its context, everyone can be successful at this. So we want to cause all of you to kind of hopefully see it in that light and be at peace with the process itself and then master it. So that's the main goal behind all of our recruiting events at IGDA Seattle. And I'm very happy to introduce you guys, our 5 panelists who are experts at this. So I'm going to ask the panelists to do a round and briefly introduce yourselves. Why don't we start with Nellie?
Hello, my name is Nellie Hughes. I'm a design manager at Monolith right now. So, well, not exactly a recruiter. I do a lot of hiring for my department. I'll let you introduce the next person. I don't know if we're passing the mic or not.
Sure. How about Niccole?
Hi, everyone. My name is Niccole Minka. I'm Managing Director of GG Locators. I started the company a few years back to focus specifically on recruiting for game studios, AAA, indie, AR, VR, esports, just a ton of clients all across the United States so that we could help match them with awesome candidates who are looking for work. And yeah, a little bit about me.
Thank you, Niccole. How about Nathan?
Hey, I'm Nate. I've been in video games for 20 years, hiring, building, coaching teams at PlayStation, Zynga, Amazon. Currently, I operate the indie games job board, WorkWithIndies.com, where we're connecting talent with opportunities specifically in indie games.
Okay, how about you, Robin?
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm the Senior People and Engagement Manager at Harebrained Schemes, and I've been there for about 9 years, wearing various hats, and for the last 3 or so, I've been doing recruiting and hiring.
Awesome, thank you. And Bryan, you're the last one.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Bryan Baek. I've been at Bungie now for the past 5 years or so. I head up the recruiting department here. I've been in games for close to 10 years, so worked at Zynga, Disney, Monolith, and a few other places as well. Excited to be here.
Cool. So I want us to start talking about, traditionally we had the resumes, the CVs, and sometimes even the cover letters. But in the last few years, things seem to have moved more and more online. So I'd like to ask you guys about that. What's the right medium these days to kind of apply a job, that document, that resume? Is that still the resume as an attachment to an email or uploaded to some website? Is it the LinkedIn profile now? Are resumes outdated? What's the right platform? And feel free to jump in, or if none of you jump, I will volunteer you guys.
Well, I'm happy to share. We do all of our applications online, and so you are uploading a resume, which is really important. If you are an artist, your portfolio link is going to be almost more important. And then there's usually, we have some additional questions. And so I would say that paying attention to the entire application process is really important. We have people that don't always answer all the questions that we ask, and that's something that I definitely pay attention to.
As somebody that staffs for a lot of different companies all over, and I'm recruiting and headhunting as well, so LinkedIn is huge for me. Obviously, once I talk to you and I ask for a resume so I can get it in front of the client, it's important that that resume looks good, but I think it's equally as important for a LinkedIn profile to say what you do, especially because all the titles can be so similar. If you just say software engineer at XYZ company, what type of engineering were you doing? What do you want to do? Put all that information out there so people can see it.
I definitely agree that LinkedIn is also really important. If I am given a resume by one of our recruiters, LinkedIn is usually the first place I'll go check it out, just because it usually has additional information or more details sometimes than a traditional resume may have.
Yeah, I'd say it's all of the above. We've had a couple thousand jobs posted on WorkWithIndies.com. Every one of them asks for a resume, and many will ask for a variety of portfolios, cover letters, and then forms that ask a variety of different questions. And they don't specifically ask for a LinkedIn profile, but to Nelly and Niccole's point, it's great to have when you want to drill down, and actually when you get past that first process, after seeing the resume, want to learn more about this individual. We're going to go to LinkedIn first. We're going to go to your portfolio and your personal sites as well. And then for recruiters, and hiring managers, that's where we're going to discover you, is in your online presences. And LinkedIn is the one where we're basically, you're shouting, saying, "I'm here," and then we know that, so that's where we're looking. So it's not simplified things, right? It's actually gotten harder. You can't just rely on a resume and a cover letter today. You've got to actually cover all of these bases.
Bryan, do you have anything to add?
Honestly, nothing too much to add. I think Nate actually kind of covered it really well. I think for us, it's like it's really kind of like all of the above. I think like a good example I would use, like a real case study for us, is like, technology can sometimes be a little bit of a blocker. Like if like a resume doesn't process right into our applicant tracking system, then like that resume will get knocked out. But if we have their LinkedIn profile, then we can go look at their LinkedIn profile and like, kind of connect the dots about that individual.
About that LinkedIn account, do you guys pay attention, or should the candidates pay attention to getting the kind of more LinkedIn features in there, like the references, or the like so many people say this person is experienced with C++. Should the candidates try hard to kind of increase those numbers, those metrics within the LinkedIn account?
Happy to answer, like, at least from my perspective and lens. Like, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Like, I think there's things that, like, if they have experiences with it, absolutely. I think some people try to do a catch-all and they try to do a little bit of everything, and then it can have a little bit of the reverse effect. I think it's super helpful to be able to understand like what the person has expertise with. From the headhunting perspective, we, like, I would say, like, at least on the recruiting side, like, we always try to see, like, how can we connect the dots as much as possible about an individual, so we can make sure that we're telling a really compelling story to, like, our hiring managers, and really advise them on what this person does. And then when we do the outreach to that person too, it's helpful too. So that way we can really better understand, like, the person's background, and like how we can actually create a compelling message to them, and making sure that it's a good position, good fit overall.
How about some in either LinkedIn or resumes? Do you guys see some things and consider them as yellow flags or red flags? Like, are there things in a LinkedIn profile? I mean, Bryan, you kind of mentioned this catch-all, I guess, is one of those. But are there any other things that candidates should make sure to avoid?
For me, in my particular fields, usually it's kind of the catch-all resume. I have a particular skill set that I hire for, and sometimes I will get, particular ones submitted for, my background is in design, but they're like, I'm a producer, I'm a designer, I'm a programmer too. And it's like, well, you're applying for a design position, so maybe you should tailor your resume for a design position. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me.
Yeah, we definitely we coach our people in our community to, if they do have if they are multiple disciplined, you actually want to customize your resume, maybe even create multiple resumes, right? So if you're a designer and a producer, you might have two completely separate resumes, and you're really then targeting that to the job that you're applying for. In general, I think that's the big red flag, is not actually spending the time to do some customization and tailor both your resume and your cover letter to the role that you're applying for. And that could be as simple as a cover letter saying, dear hiring manager, being very general and never really mentioning the role or the company or anything in the job description. When I'm reviewing resumes, I'm looking for those nuggets, the insight that tells me that you're actually paying attention to this role. You're really truly interested in this role, and you're not just blanket kind of spray and praying for any job opportunity, because I want to hire people that are really going to be engaged with my opportunity. As Bryan said, I need to make a compelling case, to a hiring manager or to my superiors or my team that these are people that we actually want. It's going to be worth us spending the time on these individuals to bring them in for an interview. And those are signals that you could send, good and bad, depending upon how you're presenting yourself in your cover letter. Robin also mentioned, the job description or the form will ask very specific questions, make specific requests. It's really important that you have a high attention to detail, and then you're actually responding to those specific requests in your application materials. It's telling us again that you're paying attention to us. You're really interested in this job. You do have a high attention to detail. If we hire you, we want you to have an attention to detail on the job, right? So this is like your first professional assignment that you're actually submitting to your new hiring manager. That's the kind of the weight and the gravity that I would put against it. And I would say if you're not doing this level of work in submitting your applications, understand that other people are. And they're likely going to get those interviews, versus somebody who isn't.
How about the way to kind of let's dig a little deeper here into that customization work. Do you guys see candidates doing, like if a candidate sees a position, reads the job description, likes the job, wants to apply, and they start kind of hunting for the keywords in there and then reapplying them to their resume? Are these the kind of tactical things we are talking about here? Can you be a little more specific in terms of like action items? What are some of the things or tips for candidates that they can do to customize?
I think in that situation, it's still very important to be honest, because it's very easy to see who's copied and pasted portions of a job description to fluff stuff. What I always recommend for people is to create a never-ending resume. So if you do a lot of different things, and you start getting up to 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of experience, and you've done production and design, you can go back and look at all the production and design work you've done that maybe you forgot about, because after a few years, you're like, oh, I did do that project. And then you can take that snippet from 3 years ago and put it on your design resume, and it's applicable, but it's still true, and it's not copying verbatim what is just word for word, because we all pick up on that pretty fast. I think we all look at enough resumes to do that.
Cool. Robin, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think we were talking about cover letters a little bit. I don't know if we've really gone into that. And what I want to see in a cover letter is enthusiasm for the role that the person is applying for. And I really often people will sort of redo their resume in letter form, and that's really not work you need to do. I want to know what interests you about the company. I want to know what interests you about the particular role. So I don't, again, like Niccole said, I don't need you to sort of use keywords, but I want to see enthusiasm. And that really can come through in a cover letter.
I guess I'd be remiss if I don't ask the length question, right? For both cover letters and resumes, what would be the ideal length? Some people say 1 page, some people say 1 sheet, some people say, no, it's okay, it can be longer. What do you guys think about that?
Ideally, 1 page each. For extended careers, my resume, I've been in games for 20 years, my resume is 2 pages long. Like Niccole suggested, I have a much bigger resume that's like 7, 8 pages long, with the long list of results that I've accumulated over the years. And then I pull in, so it's not keywords, it's looking at a job description and saying, what are they looking for? And I say, okay, well, I actually have a result that proves that I'm good at that, right? And then I'll pull that bullet point in and replace it with something else that's not necessarily relevant, to the role. But 1 page each, Two, I guess the rule of thumb is a page for every 10 years, like just as a kind of general guideline on resume length.
Just keep making my font smaller and smaller and smaller, and I don't think that's what you should do. So don't take that advice at all.
We have a custom emoji, margin emoji in our Discord because of the arguments that I get in with people over margins on the resumes.
It's great.
That is, again, like the ability to actually take this information and then communicate it in a concise format. Again, that's helping you display who you're going to be, on this new team, right? And especially if we're going to be in a remote and asynchronous world, written communication and communicating concisely is critically important. So if you've got 3 years of experience and you can't figure out how to fit that on, one page on a resume, that again might actually indicate some issues around your written communication skills. So that's something you want to work hard at and put on display.
And I think you made a good point too about being able to show what you've done based on reading the job description. And I've seen a lot of people put like responsible for X, Y, and Z, which matches very closely to the job description. But if it says responsible for leading a team, instead of just saying that you led a team, how many people did you lead? How much hiring did you do? Were you responsible for their quarterly reviews? And just quantifiable amounts that show in a time frame that show I have done this and this is the proof.
I love that. That's I think we've been talking about some of the things, some of the gotchas or red flags. What are some of the things that actually we look for on resumes and cover letters that really stand out to us, that grab us? And we're all looking at hundreds of cover letters and resumes, so it's the stuff that really pops off the page and brings us deeper into that document and that person.
You're essentially trying to tell a story with your resume and what you've done, and that's that communication piece as well. That's a piece of it.
Awesome. So I'll move on to the next step then. Let's say a candidate managed to catch the attention of a recruiter or a hiring manager, and now it's time to have a phone or Zoom conversation or whatnot. Again, what are some of the positive and negative signs that you guys look for in those first conversations that start the process?
One of the things I look for is kind of attention to detail. It comes down to how do they present the background of their interview, area, and have they turned all of their communication devices off? Are they distracted? I as I over here look at Discord trying to ignore it, but it's just the little things. I had an interviewee constantly look at their watch throughout an interview, and it was it wasn't a huge deal, but it was just something that I picked up on, and I just was like, well, do they not want to be here with me? Do they have something else important? If it is more important, they should tell me. And I almost got distracted with the fact that they were being distracted. So I think those are just two little things that advice that I would give.
I would add on a little bit more there too, with like like sometimes like we have to use like programs to do like whiteboarding exercises and things like that. A lot of times it's like don't have personal tabs open. Like it's like we don't really want to see that. Sometimes it can get a little controversial with things like that, so we try to just avoid. I would just say try to avoid some of those things. And honestly, like to Nellie's point, I think it's soft skills. It's like the communication. Is a person not, are they present in the meeting itself? Like, there's been a couple instances, even for myself, like when I'm interviewing somebody, they're yawning, and I'm like, am I boring you? Like, like I'm trying to, make sure that this is an exciting opportunity here at Bungie. But it's like I think it's just small things like that, just making sure that you're present and like thinking about the very soft skills and just being like, just having good presentation skills overall.
ultimately, whether it's a phone call or a Zoom interview, these are conversations. And so we try and be really understanding. We know if those things make people really nervous. We try and put people at ease as much as possible. So that, some of my best advice is just remember it's just a conversation and we're just people on the other side of the screen or the phone.
I think to that end, like Robin, when you're interviewing somebody, like you're hoping that you're going to hire this individual. Like we have a big person-sized problem to solve, right?
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely what we're doing here. We're talking to you because we hope that you can solve our problem, right? So that's like, if you come in like kind of knowing that with that mindset, like it's not necessarily like, evaluating you and your talent, and your skill, like, are you good enough? It's, are you the right fit, and can you solve this team's big problem? And we're going to be real big advocates. So we're looking for reasons to say yes to you, not necessarily reasons to say no, right? So that person is going to be on your side. A recruiter's really going to be on your side. So in that conversation, you can also kind of let them lead you, right? And follow their lead or their questioning to give them exactly what they want and they're looking for on that call, instead of being nervous and rambling like I am.
I can actually verify that from my experience as one of the programmers who interviewed a lot of programmers. Same thing is very true for the technical interviewers as well. I've had several times where we were able to find someone who would be a great fit, and after the interview, we literally celebrate. Like a bunch of programmers get together and say, "Oh my God! Like this person was amazing! Like I really think they'll help us a lot." And so yes, that is true for the technical interviewers as well. That one of the things, Robin, you mentioned is the conversation. I want to kind of tie that into our next question here, because also it seems important that candidates also ask their questions. Like it's not just the interviewers asking questions and the interviewees are answering, but interviewees can and should probably have some questions too. What are some of the questions that you like to hear or that you don't like to hear, if there are such questions?
I'm happy to jump in here. I don't know if that was directed to me. I like to know from a person's questions that they are familiar with the company and our games. You'd be surprised that we have people who come in and even into the interview process and ask just extremely basic questions that a quick, Google search would be able to, they'd be able to find the answers there. I think it's about being genuine and being curious about the teams and the studio and how we function, in the same way that we're curious about what people's experiences have been, to make sure that we're a match, because you are interviewing us as much as we are interviewing you.
Right, I'm giving these pauses to give you guys a chance to jump in. But feel free to jump in at any point. One of the things that usually puzzles a lot of people, as far as I can see, is kind of the after the interview. So after the phone interview or after the in-person interview, in all of those cases, there are some next steps and they may not be clear for the candidates. What are your suggestions to job seekers out there in terms of how to follow up after a phone interview or an in-person interview about the next steps? Like, what would be the right way to do it in a way that's not pestering you guys, but also kind of showing, again, professionalism, etc. What would be the timelines, what format, email, phone, etc.
I would say here at Bungie, like I try to direct all of our recruiters to actually provide as much transparency as possible, so we kind of nip that in the butt to begin with. But if for whatever reason that doesn't happen, or if something gets delayed, like I would say typically like a few days, like outside of whatever that timeline is that has been told by the recruiter, by the hiring manager, like usually an email is fine. I would say like on our team, like a lot of times we actually ask like, hey, is it actually okay if we text you, so we can go back and forth on text message? And if they're not okay with it, then we would go with email. Like emails are kind of our primary, and then we'd look at other platforms as like a potential secondary like way to contact somebody. And part of that is because emails sometimes they end up in spam, and that happens a lot with our emails. So it's like just other avenues in case like we don't see it or whatever happens. So it's long story short, I would say like a few days or so.
I feel like with me being a third party and kind of playing in between the candidate and the client, I always just ask them to message me directly, unless I know the client is like, yes, you can just put them on LinkedIn, like they're fine with it. I've worked with them for a long time. They're good with it. Or even if I've worked with them for the long time and I'm like, I will pass it along on your behalf. So I think that's kind of an added perk when someone's working with me and I can, maybe they're interviewing at 3 different places and I'm like, just send me the thank you letter individually for each and I'll make sure it gets to the right people for you.
Yeah, I think the appropriate path is, to communicate through your main point of contact, right? So if you're working through a recruiter, they're your POC and they've been organizing everything, you send them a thank you note and ask them to pass it along to the team, versus actually trying to then track down the individuals that were part of your interview loop. And I would do that, after the interview, I would do that same day or next day, just to send a thank you note. In terms of follow-up, you'd be comfortable waiting, a week, a few days to a week for the first follow-up. And usually, I might wait another week for a second follow-up if I'm really excited about that particular role. But after that first follow-up, I'm usually going to leave it in their hands to get back to me. Also understanding and respecting that you're typically, especially companies, we're talking about Bungie and Harebrained, they're receiving hundreds of applications for each role, if not more. So they might have their hands full with a lot of applications and interviews.
I definitely agree with the thank you note right after. I think that's actually really important. I personally, when I was looking for a job, I actually was told that helped in the past. So I think it's a really nice and sincere thing to do. And I am the same. A couple days to a week after, just to kind of check in to see where things are. If you haven't heard anything, is a good time frame.
Kind of a related question from one of our Twitch viewers. They ask, how do you suggest I follow up with a job application after not hearing back? So I guess this is kind of a few steps back. Somebody has applied and they're not hearing back. Is there a good etiquette of how to ping that? I guess not. No. Okay.
I mean, not unless you have like a personal contact at that company, you might be able to ping that individual, understanding that if they're not directly related to the hiring process, they may be limited in what they can do. But again, we're looking to fill positions, right? This is a big problem. We've got a person-sized job to do. If I'm a hiring manager, it means that there's somebody that I need in that role. I'm probably doing their job in addition to my job, right? So if I'm getting high quality applications, believe me, I'm prioritizing and I'm reaching out to those people because I want to fill this position as fast as possible. So if you're not receiving replies, it's either an indication that they're not interested, or they may just again be flooded with other applications and they're dealing with those candidates first before they move on to the next group. That would be my experience and what I've done in the past. I'd love to hear any conflicting anecdotes.
Yeah, I'd say another scenario that can happen is I'm the only recruiter at Harebrained Schemes, and if I have 5 or 6 roles, it may, we only have so much time. There are only so many days in the week, so we're, just the timeline can sometimes shift unexpectedly. So I guess I would ask for patience and know that we try and get back to everybody as soon as we can.
I think that might also tie into, what does your resume look like? Why is it not catching someone's attention? So make sure that you're networking. And so if there's somebody in that type of role that you like, and maybe you can join an event like this and see that they're on it. And after these sort of things, we're all getting sorts of messages from people who are commenting on what we said. So maybe, hey, can you look at my resume really quick? Maybe there's something that I'm missing for this opportunity. And we can say, hey, like you've got 2 or 3 years of experience and you're applying for a lead level role that requires them to manage 25 people. Like let's reassess what jobs we're looking at and get you matched up with the right level fit so that you're getting reached out to because you match the job description. So maybe there's a disconnect there. There's mentorship programs. If you have an ArtStation portfolio and you look at the Mentor Coalition and see if they can tweak and help you get it to the level that it needs to be at. So I think there's a lot of resources there if you're not hearing back that you can utilize to make sure that you're standing out in the crowd.
Yeah, I love that. It's actually, you think about your application process as kind of a funnel. The top of the funnel is your application materials, right? Are you getting callbacks? And if you're not actually getting to that next step in the funnel. And it could be an indication that your application materials need some work. And so if you're applying for dozens of roles and you're not getting callbacks, like that would be the signal that I have to actually stop applying and actually go and work on my materials, try to speak to people that have been successful in getting jobs and growing their careers, and then utilizing some of these resources, mentorship programs, Discord communities, to kind of level things up before I start applying again. I hear from individuals who say like they've applied for hundreds of jobs over the last year. Like that's a huge red flag for me, because applying, if you're actually putting the work into applications, it's a lot of work to apply for hundreds of jobs. So if you're truly applying for hundreds of jobs, I doubt that you're actually putting the level of effort, into those applications that's actually required to get the hiring manager or the recruiter's attention. So I would stop way before then if you're not getting callbacks and go back to your materials.
Cool. One of the things that I want to make sure we cover is, as you all know, 2020 happened, and we are all in this COVID pandemic. Everything got impacted by this, but in particular, how has the recruiting processes been impacted by the pandemic? Are there things that drastically changed that candidates should be aware of? Are most of the changes kind of beyond the first state? Are the first few steps of the top of the funnel, as you call it, Nate? Has that changed? What are some of the things that you see with the pandemic in mind? Someone looking for a job today, what should they be thinking of with regard to the pandemic's effects?
Well, I would say at Bungie, like one of the things that we used to do, we would always bring every candidate on site. During the pandemic, that obviously has changed, and we had to transform to doing like interviews over Teams and Zoom calls. One of the things that's been interesting is like, I think actually having like a good internet connection is just so important. Like it's like when you're all of a sudden doing a video interview and like somebody drops out or they start getting choppy, it's like things that you would never think about, like, when you're doing an on-site interview. Like, I think it's just like making sure that you have a good connection and It's like if you have to do it on your phone, like making sure you have like some sort of stand for it, because there's been times where I'm like, when we're screening somebody, and then it's like it feels like you're in like some sort of like, some sort of movie where it's like they're like kind of self-documenting, and it can give you motion sickness to a certain degree.
I actually just recently went to my job at Monolith, and during the phone interview or my Zoom call interview with the president or the head of the company, my internet dropped, and it was pretty terrifying. So yes, make sure that you have a good internet connection if you can.
Do you guys see major changes in the team structures themselves? The positions do more positions turn into remote in your experience, as opposed to the past, where the team configurations, are they becoming more remote oriented?
I mean, with the number of job descriptions that I see, and I get to see, I've been able to watch the evolution of jobs being posted over the past year. And certainly we're now seeing more and more remote roles. And you could see studios that were resistant to it, to commit to it up front, that are then now embracing that. And part of that is because they need to attract high quality talent, and high quality talent is demanding remote opportunities. So we're definitely seeing more of that, but it's really complicated, and especially for smaller companies, right? Like a Bungie, like Monolith. They probably might have multiple studios. They might have offices in multiple countries, and the wherewithal to hire across borders. Smaller companies, like, it starts to get really complicated and really expensive, very, very quickly, to employ people full time outside of their own location. So those smaller companies, when they're working with people remotely, it's typically on a contract basis, and there are a lot that are doing it now that would prefer to be local and on site in the future. So I think the number of remote roles has grown, and it will still grow, be more than we saw pre-pandemic, but there will be a bit of a snap back to more on-site or local roles, and more of kind of just a flexible local working conditions.
Yeah, to Nate's point, he brings up, I can't remember the exact stat, but I read something recently where it's like, I think almost like 30 or 40% of job descriptions out there are saying that there's some flexibility with remote of some sort. And honestly, once upon a time, Bungie, we had to have everybody in office, and COVID transformed our ability to work from home, and we realized it. Even just a couple of weeks ago, for example, we actually just unlocked our first couple positions that were actually comfortable having permanent remote people in California, for example. So it's definitely going to continue to expand. I think it's going to be more company and role specific in terms of what their comfort level is with it. And some roles are going to need a lot of in-person collaboration, and that's hard to get away from. So I think some organizations are going to continue to have that depending on the role and the company size. But I think it's going to be something here, in my opinion, that's going to be here to stay.
I think one thing that we've seen with the pandemic, entry-level roles, they're hard to come by anyway, but there's just so much less, there's so much fewer entry-level roles today in the pandemic. And I think part of that is because we're in this remote environment. And onboarding and training and ramping up individuals, new hires, that's a really difficult process. There's a lot of time and effort, and big teams that are built around developing a strong process to hire and onboard people successfully. And we've all been doing that. Most of us have been doing that in an on-site environment, and don't necessarily, we're trying to figure it out now, but haven't necessarily built the systems to be able to do that in a remote environment. I think we're still wanting to do better in an on-site environment. So trying to do it well in a remote environment has made, we acknowledge, I think the industry companies are acknowledging, like, we're just not really good at that yet. We're not equipped for it. So if we hire more junior employees, we might not actually be setting them up for success. So I think there's been less entry-level opportunities as a result of that. That's something that might change as we get better at it, but we just haven't thought about, onboarding people, entry-level people remotely until now.
That's interesting, and you did mention you did mention of a snapback in terms of after the pandemic, if we get back to kind of more normalcy. So my question is kind of around that. What are some of the things you guys think, other than that, in terms of the effects of pandemic? Which ones of those things are likely to get back to kind of similar levels and the pre-pandemic levels, like in terms of the recruiting processes or the distribution of remote versus in-office jobs? Which ones do you think are likely to stay?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Brian. Robin, are you going to recruit when you interview, or is it going to be on site again, or are we Zoom interviews from here on out? It's a lot cheaper, right? But
it's a lot cheaper. It's interesting. We've probably hired the largest number of remote people, ever. And we've hired the most number of people we've hired ever in this past year. I think we will be more open and better equipped to do remote interviews. We've done some before, but there was always sort of an awkwardness. It's actually something I've been thinking about. It's like having a panel of people in a room and then a person on a screen is really awkward. But if everybody's on the screen, then it sort of levels the playing field in a certain way. And we've gotten good at it. We've, like I said, we've hired a lot of people this year, and so we've really gotten good at interviewing remotely. But I do think that it leaves you at a little bit of a disadvantage because you can't show off. You can't entice somebody because of your great office space or, the people that they're going to be meeting and working with. It's a little bit different. You can't have somebody, if it's for a more senior role, you can't have somebody come in and do an interview in the morning and maybe go out and just have lunch in a casual way and then, finish up the interview in the afternoon. So I think it's going to be, I don't have any real answers of what it's going to be. I do think that you're right that the flexibility of working from home, depending on the role, is going to be very different going forward. For Harebrained as a smaller company, I don't think we'll have people who are working remotely, who we will hire in remotely. Just the size of where we're at, that it probably won't work for us. But we'll see, I never would have said the things that had happened in this past year would have happened. So who knows what the future will bring.
Yeah, I've been trying to ask around to a lot of the candidates that we work with and even some that we don't work with, just to get a sense and a feel for the market come probably around September when things maybe. That's the month I keep hearing, the golden month. So, but I've been asking, I'm like, hey, I want to hear from people that just aren't reaching out to me because they need a job, want a job, or are looking for a job. I want to hear from the people that are actually at these studios and are happy. You're not looking. So what are you going to do if your studio says, hey, now we want you back, and you don't want to go back, or you do want to go back and they're like, hey, now your job's remote. Yay. And you're like, no. So, because a lot of my clients have put their own surveys out to candidates and they've come back and they're like, people want to be back. And then I put my survey out and I'm like, apparently not everyone does want to, not my numbers are not the same as your numbers. So it's interesting to be like, are people scared to say the right thing in the company surveys and that they're feeling more open with me? Or is it just the people that I hit that are responding to me? I'm not really sure, but I think there's going to be a really interesting change come September, whenever it is, of just like, and people entering and people exiting and just kind of flipping all over the place. So I'm curious to see what that's going to pan out like, but I'm trying to get ahead of it and let everybody know best I can.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. Hey, everyone, this is Ben Premack. I'm helping with moderating on the Twitch stream and collecting all of your questions together. And we've had a couple of excellent questions. So I'm going to go ahead and shift the conversation now a little bit in that direction. And I'll go ahead and lead that off with one that I think that dovetails in really well with the conversation that we've been having, which is one of the participants asked about, you guys were talking about the necessity of having a good internet connection, and just how challenging that can be for people who are seeking jobs and might not have the resources in order to pay for premium internet, and how that's a diversity and inclusion problem. And so I was curious about your take on, both advice that you might have for people who are in that situation, and what sort of things you as recruiters can do to deal with those sort of challenges. Because obviously if you're flying someone into the Bungie office here in Bellevue, then that's not a challenge. You don't have to worry about an internet connection when you're sitting at someone's table with them. But it is a challenge if you're trying to connect with them over Zoom. So I'll just ask that one question, leave the rest of them to Bilgem, but just wanted to hop in. Thank you all.
I would say, like, at least for me, like, you have to make the ask. Like, you can't be shy to not make the ask of like an accommodation request. And, I think for us, it's like, we'll figure something out to make it work. We can do phone calls. We can think about modifying the process around a little bit. We could even potentially send equipment out. Like, there's things that we can do to make sure that we're accommodating that. So can't be shy, just have to make the ask, and we're more than willing to help and support things like that for sure.
Great. One of the repeating questions I think is interesting, which we didn't touch on, is again, at the first kind of catching the attention of the recruiter phase, I guess. One of our viewers asked, for hobbyist game devs and game jammers, how useful is it to display game projects? How useful is it to include non-relevant professional experience? I guess, there are two questions, but.
I'm happy to jump in. At least from my perspective, it's so important to show off your game projects. Honestly, if you don't, it's like, that's how people get knocked out, especially early in career. It's if we just see your education and experience that's not relevant to the role, like, it doesn't show. Like, the game projects, portfolios, anything that you're doing, like extracurricular activities, like, that's going to be the thing that sets you apart, like, at least for like a lot of our Bungie hiring managers.
I always tell them to go above and beyond just school too. Like, if you have a school project on there, you and your other 20 people that you did it with did that same project. So what have you done in your own time to show going above and beyond? Are you modding any of your own games, or have you graded any of your own games? What else are you doing in addition to?
I'm always interested in trying to be able to play them too. So, if possible, throw in a link to an executable or some form link that, allows me to access availability to play it.
On the flip side of that, don't include a link to a broken game. Don't include broken links, right? It's actually, it's such a negative impression. And it happens a lot.
One kind of related question. You guys did mention about the portfolio, but one interesting question we had is, I'm going to kind of paraphrase, making an amazing portfolio or a personal website versus the content within it. The question was about, should we kind of focus also on the design of the portfolio website itself, to kind of package the pieces of artwork that I am showing off, or should we kind of keep that simple and make sure the content that I am trying to show off is taking the most of the focus?
I would say spend your time on the contents of your work, and make sure that you're showing your best work. Don't show everything that you've ever done. It's something our art director in particular, when people write us and ask for advice, he says, I would rather see 3 things that are great than 6 things that are kind of okay. So I don't know if that helps, but that's the advice that he gives. And he's the one who's looking at the portfolios.
Yeah, unless you're a web designer, don't worry about your web design, showing off your web design skills, right? And in fact, I'm a big fan of using things like Notion or Dropbox Paper, which are just documents, right? And just effectively communicating clear, concise images, videos, GIFs, just links to all the stuff in your portfolio that you want to show off in a single page, so I could really easily access it and view it, very, very quickly, versus getting lost in navigation, maybe clicking on links that you don't necessarily want me to click on first, right? So if it's all on one page, you're kind of guiding me, through your story. I'd spend all of your time there, much less on design.
There's a question that has been repeated in the questions that we received in different forms, so I'm going to combine them into one question here. A number of people are asking for tips to get noticed by recruiters without having a ton of games experience on their resumes, whether they are new grads or people with experience on non-game parts of the software industry or something.
I think this goes back to what can you do to set yourself apart by getting some game experience, and are you taking, like, what have you done, or have you gone into Unreal and tried to play around and figure some things out? Have you taken any of the free thing? There's so much free stuff online to figure this sort of thing out, and to create your own game, and to network with people who have made their own games. And I'm very excited for someday when we get to go back to conferences and stuff. But just putting yourself out there and learning everything that you can learn, so that you can say, hey, yeah, I'm new, but this is what I've been trying on. How can I get better? And just continuing to network and find people who can mentor you and say, hey, tweak this, make this a little bit better, and be in the Discord channels. And eventually it'll show up and someone will pull you in to work on something with them. I feel like that's a lot of how some of the entry-level people have gotten in. If it's not QA, it's because somebody said, hey, I liked that work that you did. Someone did a mod of my best friend's town for a dystopian game, and actually got pulled out of, he was in school and he did finish, but he got pulled right into Rockstar because they liked the work that he had done on this mod. So it's possible. You just got to put some time and effort into it and show people what you can do if you're really passionate about it.
What do you think, Niccole, about like non-game developer roles? So video games is beyond just making games itself, right? And somebody from the outside of the industry, in maybe it's a marketing or a biz dev or a finance role, what do you think about them transitioning over? And then a second part of that would be like, what if somebody's in finance today, wants to be a game developer, but then is looking at trying to break in?
So the first part with marketing, I always come back to networking, and maybe that's because I am a recruiter myself, and so it's my job to network with people. But it's okay. So you like marketing. Now to check out some of the job descriptions. What do the job descriptions say? What are the requirements for the job descriptions? Because maybe that job description doesn't require game dev experience, and they're just going to love your passion. And they read your cover letter and get why you're interested in doing it. And now you're setting yourself apart because of that cover letter and that tie. If you don't have the requirements on the job description, where are you falling short? What can you do to amp up those parts? And I think that works across the board. I think that works for marketing, that works for finance, that works for like, there are some roles that just don't necessarily require game dev experience. And then the second part of your question was?
Like, what if somebody, started in finance and that's what their career is, but they aspire to actually be a game developer? What's the path? Maybe they're toying around, they're a hobbyist. But is there a path to getting into games for somebody like that?
I think that there is a pathway. It's just, it's with any career change. I think that doesn't necessarily mean finance to games. That could be a teacher looking to go into become an EMT. Like, you have to kind of take a little bit of a step back to lay the groundwork and figure out what you need to do to then transition over. So it's some time and commitment to put the work and the effort in and take those free courses and learn things and reach out to somebody that has made games before and say, like, hey, how did you get in? And just talk to people. Because I actually have an exact example of a woman in finance that loves games. She's a huge World of Warcraft person. And so when I was talking to someone in finance that was at a games, I don't know how many studios I can call out here, so I'll just say a game studio in Austin. And he had made a similar jump. So I was able to connect the two of them together, and he explained how he did it. And so, networking and learning other people's career paths and putting in the time and effort, I think is how you can help make that transition.
I do know that I hire for non-developer roles, right? And when I do, look, we all love people in the game industry. Like, there are people, we like them to speak our language, but at the same time, somebody with a unique perspective, an outsider coming in, like, that's a huge competitive advantage, right? Like, I'm looking to add that diversity of perspective to my team. So that actually might make you stand out and make you more interesting to me if I've got a team full of, kind of industry insiders.
Yeah, I think you can't, it doesn't hurt to try and to see what happens and put the feelers out there.
Awesome advice across the board. Oh, no, go ahead, Bilgem.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I'm looking at the time, and I think we've done a fairly decent job of kind of going over our questions and fitting them all in the 1 hour slot we had. So thank you so much once again for your generosity from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing your expertise with the community. I'll leave the floor to Ben now for some closing remarks.
Well, I think there was actually one more question, if y'all don't mind, I'd like to pose to everyone, because it's one that I've run into as a huge fan of video games. And being a lawyer in the video game industry, it's always fun meeting people. And so we had a question very, very early on, which is one of our participants, one of our audience, asked about applying and being excited for a position to a company that they're a fan of without coming across as a sycophant, without coming across like they're begging for the job. And we'd love to get your take on that before we wrap things up.
So I think that you can be genuinely excited about a position and talk about that in your cover letter, and just mention the things that excite you. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I've worked at a couple companies that had a pretty enthusiastic fan base, and we would get applicants a lot of the times apply for design jobs that would talk about their characters and how they would really go into these details. And actually, as a hiring manager, I would get just as excited about hearing about their characters and the journeys that they took with their characters. It's probably they were about telling me about them. But I would say talk about your excitement. Just keep it to the, as Nathan said, 1 page cover letter when you do it. Don't write maybe a 5-page letter about your fan love for the product. I don't know. That's just me though.
Awesome. Well,
I think.
Oh, sorry. Nate, go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, I think being a fan is a plus, right? So you should make it known. But we're probably not going to hire you just because you're a fan, right? So it's a plus, but let's talk about who you are what your skills are, what value you can really bring to the table. And I think the fandom, the enthusiasm is going to make us feel good about who you are and potential like long-term fit and satisfaction and retention kind of in the role. But balance that out also with, I think you're somebody, you're such a fan that you actually might need to come to an interview a little bit more skeptical, right? You have to actually protect against your own enthusiasm, and really challenge, and ask the really tough questions in the interview to make sure it's actually the right role in the right company and the right culture for you, instead of just being kind of blinded by, this romantic idea that you have about, working for like this brand or this game or, this narrative, this storyline. And I think that's actually a way that you can kind of offset that, right? It's like, I'm a super fan, but yeah, I'm really interested in whether or not this truly is the right fit for me. So I'm going to interview you hard and make you earn me as an employee.
Outstanding. Thank you. Well, we're a couple minutes over, and that's entirely my fault for asking you guys one more follow-up question. So just wanted to say thank you again, Nellie, Niccole, Nate, Robin, and Bryan. Thanks so much for taking time out of one of your evenings during this busy week. Really appreciate you coming and supporting the community and sharing all this information. So I haven't had the chance to introduce myself before. So once again, my name's Ben Premack. I am the chapter leader of IGDA Seattle and one of our board members here. And if you guys enjoyed this event this evening, everyone in the audience, if you scroll up to the top of the Twitch channel, you'll see a link to our Discord. Please come join us there. You can also see that we post job postings there as well, many of which are coming from Nate. So again, Nate, thank you again for organizing all of that. With IGDA Seattle, we do events like this where we try to do educational networking events. We've got a networking event coming up next month on May 13th at 7 o'clock. We're going to be doing kind of a combined educational and networking event where we do a studio highlight with one of the local studios called Systemera Softworks. They're the developer and publisher of a game called Astroneer. A bunch of really good people there. We've got a swath of their team coming in to talk about their experience in starting up a studio and then taking a game from concept to completion. And now they do live ops and support and community management and all of that. So it should be a really, really interesting conversation to participate in. After that, later in the summer, we're going to be doing a networking event where we'll be getting together for a summer picnic. Come by, say hi, have a burger or a hot dog. Hopefully we will all be vaccinated by then and actually able to say hi, but it looks like we will be. So please do so. Again, like, follow, and subscribe. And that's the best way to keep track of everything that we're up to. And then by all means, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And then as well, the presenters today, I'm sure they would love to hear from you too. So thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and shut down the Twitch stream now, and hopefully we'll see you next month with our studio highlight with Systemera.